Welcome to MIDI's Innovation Vault podcast. In this episode of Medtech's Next Wave, Innovators from LSI, we're joined by Bill Cologne, CEO of Singlepass, a company redefining minimally invasive surgical solutions. Singlepass has developed an electrocautery device that prevents bleeding during biopsy procedures, enabling patients to go home immediately without extended hospital monitoring. With regulatory clearance in Europe and the US and a commercial launch underway, Bill shares how Singlepass overcame challenges in funding, technical development, and hospital adoption to bring this innovative technology to market. Join us to learn how Singlepass is transforming biopsy care and improving patient outcomes.
Welcome to the MIDI Innovation Vault podcast, where we spotlight pioneers in medical technology and development. I'm Greg Montalbano, your host and the COO of MIDI Medical Product Development. Today, I'm joined with Bill Cologne, the CEO of Singlepass, a company generating innovation in minimally invasive surgical solutions. Bill, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Greg. Appreciate it.
To start off, Bill, could you tell us a bit more about your background and what led you to Singlepass?
Sure. It's a long story because now I've been doing this for 42 years. I have a degree in chemical engineering from Arizona State University, but I was very fortunate. My very first job out of college was with a local medical device company in Tempe, Arizona, where I went to school, called Ep3. That's where I took my first job as a process engineer. And that company at the time was a small startup, and they made surgical vascular grafts. So through that tenure, and I actually stayed for 11 and a half years. When I joined the company, we had sales of about $1 million and only 25 employees. By the time I left, we had sales of about $50 million and over 200 employees. And I was fortunate enough to be in there early with the timing to work my way up through to become director of operations. So I was in charge of all the manufacturing and what they called engineering back then, which was both R&D engineering and manufacturing engineering. So that set the stage for me to learn how to develop medical devices. And since then, almost the entire career has mostly been making products for either vascular surgery or endovascular therapists. So it's more of a concept to commercialization background. I do have a little bit of engineering expertise, but mostly I just know that, the path and the requirements for getting an idea from a physician, class 2 or class 3, all the way from the idea in their head to a commercialized product.
That's great. Can you share with us the origin story of Singlepass, providing like an overview of the technology, its application, the device that you have, and highlight any specific challenges in the healthcare that you're addressing within the marketplace and how your solution stands out?
Okay. So this one came to me like most of them do years ago, probably 15 years ago. I developed an orthopedic product for a hand surgeon in Phoenix, and it was successful because we sold it to Stryker. So now every time his physician friends have an idea, he'll text me and say, "Hey, I have another physician friend with an idea. Can I share it with you?" And so he's done this several times. But 4 years ago, he texted me and said, "I know 2 interventional radiologists in Phoenix, and they have a clever idea." So actually, they had 2 ideas. I didn't like one idea, but the second idea, they told me, they said, "Hey, we work at a liver transplant center, so we do a bunch of biopsies every day, and there's a big problem. There's no product or procedure that can prevent bleeding that's caused by the biopsy tools. So when they poke a big needle in you and go through that needle and rip out a tissue sample for pathology, there's nothing they can do to absolutely control the procedure outcome. So you basically pull out the guide needle, apply pressure, and hope the patients don't bleed." Well, there's a certain well-published rate of adverse events for those procedures, and until those guys came up with an idea, there's nothing you could do other than live with that adverse event rate. So they invented an electrocautery device that had a probe long enough and thin enough to fit inside a guide needle. So by the time they contacted me, they already had a working prototype. They had one issued patent and a pending patent, but they had just tried to call companies and see if someone would buy the idea, and they couldn't get any takers. So when I met them, ended up doing diligence and saw it was a big market. They clearly had a solution for an unmet need. So a group of us out here in Southern California, we co-founded a company with them. We went and raised a seed round initially, got to first in man, then did a Series A round. And in literally exactly 36 months and $4 million, we were able to get the CE mark and FDA clearance on that device.
Wow.
So it's very clever in that right now, as I said, there's nothing doctors can do. You just, they can try to squirt a hemostatic agent into the guide needle to try to prevent bleeding. But for the most part, there's no prevention. They just have a wait period after you get a biopsy. They'll just hold you for several hours watching you. If you don't have any issue, then they'll send you home. If you do have a bleeding issue, then they may have to admit you, or they may have to do some procedure to try to stop the bleeding. But this is the first time clinicians, mostly for kidney, liver, and lung biopsies, can go in after the biopsy sample is taken, cauterize a tissue that's been damaged by the tissue gun, and then know immediately afterwards with ultrasound or CT confirmation that the patient isn't bleeding. So you don't need to hold them in the hospital for 6 or 8 hours. You can just send them home. So it's patented technology, brand new. It addresses an unmet need. And so the global commercial launch, which started in Q1 in Europe and in Q2 in the US of this year, is going quite well.
That's great. It's a great story. So in starting and growing your medtech company, that comes along with unique challenges. So what are some of the biggest obstacles you faced early on, and how did you overcome those?
You know, the biggest one usually is always raising money. So that's the first one. And just we're fortunate here in Orange County, California, there's a big angel network investment community. So that was reasonably okay. But our biggest challenge was the physicians had an idea for the device, a design idea for the device, and we had to make a significant design change. So mostly because they were using a lithium battery in their design.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you can't ship lithium batteries. So, you know, you can't have your product rely on lithium batteries. So we had to do a significant design change to accommodate. And now we just use two AA batteries. But that was kind of the biggest technical challenge. You know, and of course, it's a class 2 device. So the normal design, development, validation and verification, you know, everything you need to do to create a technical file to do your submissions. But the biggest challenge was doing this design change simply because of the battery issue.
That's awesome. So you have clinicians, obviously the inventor of the device. What other feedback from other users did you get, and how did you incorporate that into the physical design or the functionality or the usage ceremony? And how did that feedback shape the development process for your device? Any specific insights that may have come that led to new direction or improvements along the way?
Yeah, the feedback was important. And initially, when I first met these guys, before we did anything, I asked them for the name of some interventional radiologists who did biopsy procedures, and then I knew some. So I just did phone calls and asked them how many biopsies they did, what were the issues that they had. And it was interesting that the feedback was a little bit mixed. There were a reasonable number of physicians that said it's not a big enough problem for me to worry about. You know, it's only a single digit issue, you know, for these reinterventions, but they could be significant. And but the biggest thing that came out of it, we really were the physical dimensions of knowing how long the probe needed to be, how small it needed to be able to fit inside the most commonly used guide needles. Along with that, we got a lot of other feedback about, gosh, if you modified it this way, we could also do that, and we could do this. And there's a temptation to try to please everybody, but we just stayed focused and said, no, we're going to do liver, kidney, and lung biopsies. These are the length and diameter guide needles they use. Let's make sure it fits that. So ours was very, very straightforward because it's just a, you know, a very specific use. But the feedback was important. So now we are compatible with all guide needles. We can fit into the guide needle size that's used in probably more than 90% of the biopsy procedures. So that feedback, simple as it was very important for us to address the market needs.
That's great. And, you know, a lot of times difference between success and failure is just getting out there, knocking on doors, getting that information, never settling, you know, and it can be grueling, but, you know, once you do that, you have advocates, you understand the usage ceremony pre, during, and post use, and really that makes your device superior. So that's really great to hear.
Yeah, the feedback was very, very important. And it's interesting because, they're all data points because we had some physicians who had negative feedback saying that, I don't think it's necessary and I won't use that.
Mm-hmm.
They were in the minority, but you still got that. So we realize it's probably rare where you'll come up with something that has, 100% acceptance.
Sure.
But this was enough where, all the way from folks who said they didn't need it to, it's interesting. I talked to at least three people, one physician and then two just regular folks who had a loved one pass away after a biopsy procedure due to excessive bleeding. And so they go, I obviously get it. One guy told me it was his ex-wife. Another gentleman called me from Hawaii, said his mom had passed away. He wanted to be a sales rep for us because he knew how valuable the device would be because of his personal experience. So
Yeah.
All that helped shape. So it's interesting, you get data points all the way from don't even do the project to, hey, it could have saved my mom's life. So we
Yeah.
had everything, both ends of the spectrum and quite a bit in between.
Yeah, it's important to collect that, prioritize it, right? Because information without structure and priority can be chaos. So it's really good to hear that you were so thorough in that regard. Switching gears, just talking about strategic partnerships. So ultimately, they can be game changers for startups and emerging companies that have small staff or they're just getting their footing. So has there been any collaborations or partnerships that specifically impacted Singlepass's path forward?
Not really. I mean, when we started the company, we had in mind who we most likely would be acquired by.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew from our research who was in the cautery business, also who was in oncology and biopsy. So we realized that, hey, if we could get this product through both regulatory paths, the CE mark and FDA clearance, that there were a reasonable number of companies that could simply put it in their bag. Now, we did not offer any collaboration with anyone because we were kind of worried if we got in bed a little bit with one strategic, it may eliminate another one from looking at us.
Mm-hmm.
So other than making all the strategics aware of where we're at in the timeline of the company, we have not done anything beyond that. So some of the folks have started kicking the tires and are doing some diligence. But as of now, we didn't do any relationships, any joint ventures, or any collaborations with strategics thus far.
Okay. So talking about raising capital, so it's really a critical milestone for growth. And could you tell us about Singlepass's funding journey and any lessons you've picked up along the way that you can share with the listening audience?
Yeah, don't be an entrepreneur. Get a job and just have somebody pay you and not try to raise money all the time. So that's the advice. Well, no, actually, we know in Orange County what there's tolerance for out here since it's
Mm-hmm.
Med Device Central. Yeah, we know typically that if you do seed rounds for pre-revenue companies or development companies, if you keep them kind of less than $2 million, that's really tolerable for the investment clubs such as Tech Coast Angels and New Fund Ventures and folks like that. And it's also attractive to the angel investors. So actually it'll be 4 years in this coming April. So the first funding was in April of 2021. We opened up $1.5 million round on a convertible note, which
Okay.
seems to be more attractive to seed stage folks because it's hard to put value on companies when it's so early. So we had an issued patent, we had a functional prototype, we had one other pending patent,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of diligence, but instead of trying to argue with investors about what that was worth, we just said, look, here you go. Here's a 20% discount, and I forgot what the interest rate was, 6 or 7%,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll worry about it at the price round.
Mm-hmm.
So that round was reasonably easy to fill. And with that money, we were able to get all the way to treating the very first few patients in the beginning of our clinical safety study. Then once we had information that the product worked well in patients, we went and we did a priced round where we raised $2.5 million on a $5 million pre-money valuation.
Okay.
So it was good for new folks coming in, and also the way the math worked out because of the timing and the discount. The folks that participated in the seed round, they more than tripled their value. So
Right.
they were pretty pleased.
Yeah.
And that got us essentially to the finish line, that $4 million, but we just closed another $2 million literally a couple weeks ago, which is a bridge round. That was a price round at an increase in valuation. And that money will get us all the way to cash flow positive. Well, we expect to exit in 2025, so it's just the runway to get us through our exit.
Sounds great. So currently, what are some of the main challenges you're tackling relative to, I guess, exit and commercialization? What are some of your thoughts on that, potential obstacles, and how are you preparing for that ultimate exit?
Yeah, the biggest challenge, it's interesting that, we have a brand new product, so there's zero competition. So we're not going in and replacing anything. This is you're adding a new device to the procedure. So that's concern number one. So it is an added cost to the hospital, but the cost benefit and the cost savings from using the product is, far outweighs the device cost. But the two biggest things really are just letting people know you're around because no one's ever heard of this before. We're a small startup company. So it's really just the advertising and the social media push. But the biggest challenge, especially in the US, is getting through these VAC committees, the Value Analysis Committee. Even once a doctor says, hey, I'm ready to buy this, I've done a few free cases, then you've got to go through that VAC committee process, which is anywhere from 30 to 90 days in most hospitals, where it literally is, we need clinical data, we need your letter from the FDA, we need, just a bunch of different data. It varies a little bit for each center. And so one by one, you've got to go through these delays of just bureaucracy. Even after the physician says he already wants a device, it still may take 2, 3, or 4 months before the hospital can even begin purchasing inventory. So it just makes the US rollout a little slower. The
Yeah.
uptick in Europe is a little bit quicker. We use distributors. They can get it in the hospitals easier, but the pace in the US is controlled by the VAC process. That's the biggest challenge.
Yeah. That's a great perspective because in developing a product, getting it out there, there's so many other challenges, in having hospital systems or others adopt it and say, yes, this is what we want to purchase. There's a lot of hoops.
Yeah, and it is a change so that this is something new. So it's
Yeah.
the physician to go, okay, now I'm doing something new in the procedure because before I had nothing. We would just pull out the guide needle, maybe
Right.
squirt something in there, hold pressure and send the patient and have them wait. And in a lot of centers, especially for kidney biopsies, they literally hold patients overnight just to check on them. Cleveland Clinic, MD Anderson, a handful of other centers. So we said, well, look, we'll be able to show you that there's no bleeding. You can send people home right away. You don't have to take up that bed space. You
Mm-hmm.
could be using it for a higher revenue generating customer. So we think there's a lot of value in that. Plus, even though they're kept at the hospital, every hour or so a nurse checks on them to do their vitals or ask them how they're doing, so we can free up a lot of staff time as well.
Makes sense. It makes sense. My mother recently got a lung biopsy, and it didn't
Okay.
go well. So something like this could have definitely assisted in the.
Yeah, we hear a lot of stories. It is interesting, and I've even talked to at least two interventional radiologists who are very, very senior, and they say, I don't even do them anymore because I had a few problems. And so we get paid like $100 to do them. They're very short procedures. So the risk reward isn't even worth it. So I delegate it to junior folks because I don't want to take a chance at that, 1 in 50 or, 1 in 75 chance pops up and I have a very, very poor outcome.
Yeah.
So it is interesting that some of them just won't even do biopsies anymore. They just delegate.
Wow. Interesting. So the med tech industry is always changing, always shifting, relative to applications and technologies. It sounds like this device, the Singlepass device, is an emerging trend, is an emerging application. You have more of a blue ocean opportunity. Do you feel there'll be any type of technologies once you address this in the marketplace that'll be coming to sort of nipping at the heels of Singlepass, or have you seen anything, or is it, what's happening in the broader industry in and around
Yeah.
this
Well,
application?
we've seen other people have tried to do the same thing, but doing it differently. But as far as the solution for this, the one interesting thing, we're losing out now. We make widgets, stuff you manufacturer put in a box, they use them and they throw them away. And now, especially investors are looking for more software solutions and AI solutions.
Mhm.
So almost what goes into your development is consideration of can you add any software or add anything that collects data that appeals to the investment community. As far as the technology, this simple cautery technology to stop bleeding, well known. So I don't know. Someone may try to copy the device. We have
Mhm.
a method patent and we have a design patent, but of course, people will fiddle around and try to go around those things. But I think what it may lead to a handful of other procedures that might lend itself well to this type of, and I guess I'll call it, remote cautery. Right now, all the other cautery devices, you are visualizing what you're cauterizing because the probes have to have direct contact. So we're the only one where our probe tip is invisible because it's so far in the body what it's doing cautery. I think the technology that will come out of it will just be more clinical indications for similar technology. Maybe the probe shape will be different, the diameter may be different, the probe may be longer or shorter, but I think that's where it's going to all this, I guess I'll call it less invasive cautery.
Mhm. Very good. So, if there's one piece of advice you can give entrepreneurs out there, a single piece of advice, what would that be in their early stages?
Beyond they don't do it. Well, absolutely real. I mean, I think what I try to tell people, if you're considering it, the biggest thing, the startups are fun and exciting. There's this up and down pressure of the highs are higher, the lows are lower. So you're always worried, but just make sure you get yourself, I say it, financially prepped if you're going to do a startup. You'll make less money. A lot of your value will be, riding on the upside of an exit. So those jobs typically pay 20 to 40% less, and there may be some fantastic opportunities, but you've got to have yourself in, let's say, financially stable position so you can even take a chance on a startup. But
Makes
then
sense.
again, beyond that, make sure you're working with folks that you like and something that you truly believe in. That goes for everything. But yeah, if you're going to consider a startup, just make sure you planned to know that. And also, I went to work for one startup, and for exactly 4 months after the day I took a job there, the company closed with 1 day notice.
Wow. Okay.
So they say we have no pay for any packages or whatever, just we didn't get our funding, we're closing. So, understand that that type of stuff can happen.
Yeah, it's entrepreneurs need to ask themselves some tough questions. They need honest answers to themselves. Do they have an appetite for that? And
Yeah, it takes a certain personality. Yeah.
it's definitely personality and spirit, courage, and persistence. I would say those are the three things you need. If you're going
Well,
to
you
be,
have to be a big risk taker. If if you're okay with the risk, that's part of it.
yeah, yeah. All right. Well, Bill, that concludes our episode here today. And I want to thank you, for sharing Singlepass's story and the valuable insights. I really appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right. So this concludes today's episode of the MIDI Innovation Vault podcast. A special thank you to Bill Cologne for sharing Singlepass's story and insights into the future of minimally invasive solutions. So we trust you gain valuable knowledge about advancements and challenges in surgical technology. And stay tuned for more enlightening conversations with MedTech innovators. And don't forget to follow MIDI on social media for updates. Thank you for joining us. And Bill, thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of MIDI's Innovation Vault podcast, Medtech's Next Wave Innovators from LSI. We hope you enjoyed hearing about Singlepass and their innovative solutions in biopsy care. Remember to subscribe to the MIDI Innovation Vault and stay tuned for more episodes of Medtech's Next Wave Innovators from LSI, where we continue to bring you the latest innovations and thought leaders from across the medical technology industry. Until next time, keep innovating and pushing the boundaries of what's possible in healthcare.